Hi, I'm Eden from St Luke's Youth and welcome to TTQ, where we tackle tricky questions that you've heard and sent in to us. Today we're looking at the question, what about science and evolution? So, let's have a look. So this one generally comes with the assumption that you can't be a Christian and believe in science. And one of the main reasons people say that is because they assume that science, especially evolution, completely opposes Christian belief. Now this, once again, isn't really true. This is one of those problems which isn't actually as big as it seems, and the reason that we think it's a problem is because that's what we see in the media. Remember, conflict gets views, so the media is very good at making it seem like things are butting heads to get more people interested. They do it with political parties, they do it with celebrities, and they do it with science and religion. So it's not a big of a problem as the media makes it sound. There are loads and loads of Christian scientists who say that their faith goes hand in hand with their work, saying that science doesn't challenge their faith, it strengthens it. So with that, let's have a bit of a closer look at science and why it's not really a problem for Christians, and then let's have a closer look at evolution specifically. So why is science not really a problem for Christians then? Well, there's this assumption that science can explain everything, it can explain all things, and it usually goes with the statement, we should only believe what can be scientifically proven. Now, do you agree with that? Well, fun fact, that statement can't actually be scientifically proven itself. So it's a philosophical statement, not science. So why should we only believe what can be scientifically proven, as that itself cannot be scientifically proven? Science can't explain all things, and that's fine, it's not supposed to. The scientific method is designed to help us to understand how the world works by using things that we can objectively measure and observe, and it's really good at that. But there are so many things that fall outside of that zone. Like, science can't be used to explain morality, so why we say murdering the weak is always wrong, when the whole idea of nature and natural selection is that the weak die out and the strong live on. Science can't be used to prove that logic works. Science presupposes that logic works, and so to prove that it does with science would just be arguing around in a circle. Science can't prove that we're not all living in a high-tech simulation like the Matrix, and science can't actually prove science itself. Science is full of unprovable assumptions, like in the special theory of relativity, for example. The whole theory hinges on the assumption that the speed of light is constant in a one-way direction between any 2 points, but that just can't be proven. So science itself needs to rely on things that can't be scientifically proven. Often atheists will treat science like it can provide better explanations for the world than Christianity can in every way. But it's not the case. There are areas that science alone doesn't have any answers for. I cover a big one called the Kalam cosmological argument in my There's No Proof, So Why Believe It video. So go check that out if you want to find out more about it. And that's just one of the many examples where science alone doesn't provide all the answers. And Christianity provides a more logical, rational answer than atheism does. Look, science is amazing, but it's only one way of understanding the world, and we shouldn't treat it like it's the only way of explaining things. It's like trying to use a screwdriver to build a house and saying that this is the only tool that you need for everything. It works really well for assembling furniture and for attaching doors and everything that involves screws. But if you also use it as a hammer to whack nails in, or try and use it as a saw to saw through wood, or as a paintbrush to paint an entire house, you're going to have a much harder time trying to make it work for everything than if you just accepted that there are other tools available that would help. And that's what Christian scientists do, and why science generally isn't a problem for most Christians. We understand that science is an amazing gift from God that helps us to understand the world we're in. And that's why there are so many Christian scientists. Their study strengthens their faith and helps them to understand God's world, not getting in the way of it. But that's speaking generally about science. Let's have a look at one of the most famous areas of science held against Christians, evolution. So evolution is the idea that more complex life forms evolve from less complex life forms through a process of natural selection over time. Now, there's a massive difference between saying that we got here through evolution as a process and what's called naturalistic philosophy, which is the philosophical belief that there's no divine power through the universe. So, evolution, which is a scientific theory, does not automatically mean that God was not involved in the creation of the earth, which is a philosophical belief, not science. Now, although there's the general thought that evolution has to be the entire process of going from a single-celled organism to where we are now as humans and all the animals we see, there's nothing suggesting that God couldn't create life midway through that process. And then evolution is a natural process that God has installed as a way of making life continue to grow and adapt. So many Christians believe that God brought about life this way. Like the Catholic Church has come out supporting the idea that evolution is compatible with Christian belief. But that's not to say that there aren't still problems though. And a lot of the problems arise when it comes to the age of the earth. Because you could say, even if God did use evolution as a process, it still would have probably taken a much longer time than how old some Christians say the world is. Now, the general idea of this problem arises from the creation account in Genesis 1, which recounts God making the world in 7 days. It says on the first day, God made light and darkness. On the second day, sky. On the third day, land and ocean. On the fourth day, day and night. On the fifth day, fish and birds. And on the sixth day, land animals and humans. And on the seventh day, he rested. Now, the general belief with this, or the traditional belief, is the idea that God made the world in 7 literal 24-hour days, meaning that, tracking with the list of generations given in the Bible, the earth would be between 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Now obviously that doesn't really match what science suggests, which is about 4.5 billion years. But my question is, does the Bible say that God literally created the world in 7 24-hour days? Now, to understand a text, especially one from, well, an old one from a different culture, you have to understand what type of writing it is. For example, the Gospel of Luke is an eyewitness account, and so we would read it as a historical document, not poetry. The Psalms is a book of poems and songs, so you would read that as poetry and you wouldn't take it literally. But why am I telling you this? So a regular literary writing technique used by the authors of the earlier books of the Bible is to describe an event and then have a song or poem before or after it that explains the meaning of the event. And just 2 examples of these literary couplets, let's call them, are Exodus chapters 14 and 15 and Judges chapters 4 and 5. Each has an event and then has a song about the event in the following chapter that uses poetic language to emphasize the meaning of it. So you have a literal event, which you should read as a literal event, and then you have the song or the poem, which you should read as a song or poem. And I believe this is what happens in Genesis 1 and 2. Now I think this because Genesis 1 reads like a song, using the poetic rhythm of a 7-day cycle to emphasize the meaning and wonder of God's creation. And some things don't make too sense with it as well for it to be a literal account, like how days were only introduced on the 4th day. Now also, despite Genesis 1 recounting the whole of creation, Genesis 2 starts off halfway through that creation account, and it gives a different order of events in different detail, and it doesn't mention days. So this looks like another example of this writing technique of using literary couplets where Genesis 2 is a description of what we're told about creation, and Genesis 1 is a song about what happens, using poetic language to emphasize the wonder and meaning behind the event. And we should read it as that. So this would mean that Genesis 1 wasn't written to tell us practically how God created the world. Rather, it was written to tell us why, which is to share and expand his goodness, truth, beauty, and all things that are part of him into creation. The practicalities of how he created it aren't mentioned, meaning that he could have absolutely taken billions of years to form the universe. He could have, or trillions of years, he could have used the order given in Genesis 1, but it could have been over a much longer time period. So the age of the earth doesn't have to be a problem when it comes to God using evolution as a process. So I personally believe, and not everyone might agree, but I personally believe that God guided some kind of process of natural selections. And past that, I'm not sure. Although I think biblically there has to have been a literal Adam and Eve, and there has to have been a literal fall of humanity. But in the end, I'm actually comfortable saying I'm not 100% sure how God did it. And that's fine, because Genesis 1 and 2 weren't written to tell us how God created the universe. They were written to tell us why, which is that God is a relational God who had so much love, truth and beauty, and he wanted to create beings to share and receive that love. So what about science and evolution? Well, they're not as much of a problem as you might think. Science can't prove everything on its own, and if you claim to only live by what can be scientifically proven, then you're not allowed to acknowledge morals and what's objectively good and bad. You're not allowed to use logic, as that can't be scientifically proven. And you can't use any area of science itself which relies on assumption that can't be scientifically proven, which is a lot of science. Not only can you be a Christian and trust science, but they both complement each other, as together they provide better explanations for the world around us than atheism alone can. Christianity is intellectually sound. Now, if you have any questions about this video or any other tricky questions you've heard and you'd like me to answer and shine some light on, then please send me a message on Instagram, which is @StLuke'sYouth_Bath. Otherwise, thanks for watching.